What's going on, Packer fans? Welcome back to the Pack-A-Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Yes, I am wearing Packers gear today. I was recently told ever so rudely that I don't wear enough Packers stuff on the podcast, so I guess I will do a better job of that moving forward. But I'm happy you're here. Thank you for joining me. Always appreciate it. We've got some big transactions from Wednesday. I'm saying that semi-facetiously, but we did have some moves. We've got an update on Nathaniel Hackett. We've got a little bit of rumor mill buzz, which I'll get to in a moment. And then I'm going to kind of play out what I think some things that could potentially happen this offseason and really kind of how Green Bay needs to kind of prioritize and what dominoes need to fall first. So I'm going to get into all of that, but let's start off with some of the news and notes and transactions. The big one, Jack Heflin is officially back as a member of your Green Bay Packers. He signed a reserve futures deal, and that makes him a member of the Green Bay Packers again. Remember, he was released from the active roster when they signed brought back Merciless and Zadarius Smith to the active roster. They needed to release two players. They released Yadam, and then they released Heflin as well. Heflin now officially back in the fold and will be able to compete for a roster spot next season. Green Bay also brought in another undrafted free agent from last year, but another reserve future free agent signing. His name is Keandre Thomas. He is a 6', 186 cornerback. He spent some time with the Chargers playing, about 28 special team snaps a season ago. Was an undrafted free agent in 2021. So they will add him to the cornerback room and let him compete there as well. I don't have a ton of film breakdown of Keandre Thomas for you, so hope you'll have some forgiveness for me there. But again, I think he had a pretty good 7.5-ish relative athletic score. So fairly athletic corner with some special teams ability. We know Green Bay could use that they will add into the fold and add into the mix, and we'll see if anything develops there. Meanwhile, on the Nathaniel Hackett front, he will be getting a second interview with the Jacksonville Jaguars. There was some fairly significant buzz that the Jaguars were ready to move forward with Byron Leftwich as their head coach. That, at least thus far, at least as I'm recording this, has yet to come to fruition. And now the word is, and the report is, that Nathaniel Hackett will in fact get a second interview with Jacksonville as well. He's already had his second interview with Denver, so opportunities and options remain open for Hackett. If you're hoping that he's back, that's obviously not a great thing. I think most of us would like to see Nathaniel Hackett back, while at the same token wanting to see him get, of course, his dream job as a head coach in the NFL. So personally, I know I'm rooting for him to get a head coaching job, as long as that job's not in Minnesota or Chicago, as mentioned earlier. But it would be great to see him as either the Jaguars or the Broncos coach and see what he could do as a head coach in the NFL. Meanwhile, the Vikings hired their new general manager, former VP of football operations for the Browns, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, and he will again be their new general manager. I had a friend of mine who is a Bears fan, please forgive me, but asked me about their new GM and Ryan Poles and what he's going to bring. And, I think the thing is that a lot of us, whether it's via podcast, radio hit, TV analysts, whatever, we like to, go over a lot of things that we, maybe know, whatever, but trying to predict how a general manager is going to work out based on his previous stays, is near impossible, right? Unless you're in the building and actually know what this person did and what they were responsible for and those sort of things, it's a crapshoot from the outside, right? I'm sure the Vikings and the Bears both did more than their due diligence to try to find these two candidates. And from all reports, as these are two very smart football people, and that's obviously not great for Green Bay. Yeah, on paper, it seems like both the Bears and Vikings got great GM hires, which again, not great for Green Bay. But to try to analyze it and say Ryan Poles or Vikings new GM, Adofo-Mensah are going to be this is what they're going to bring to the table. It's even if I was covering for the Packers and the Packers, signed one of these GMs, or even when Gutekunst came, what can you say, right? We don't know who Gutekunst liked as a scout. We don't know, there's just so much that we don't know from inside the building. So, the Vikings and Bears both have their new GMs, and only time will tell if those moves ultimately pay off. We had some buzz around the rumor mill as well, and I'm going to go over these, not for you to take necessarily seriously, but more just to say this stuff is going to be out there. And when I see these each day, I will cover them in some capacity and just let you know of like, is this legitimate? Is this like completely without of the realm of possibility? Is this nothing? We are in off-season mode now. There's no two ways about it. And just as Aaron Rodgers was confirmed to the Broncos on draft day last year, and just as Habarkish was a bum, and just as all of these different reports came out that were erroneous and untrue throughout the course of the year, it's going to happen again this offseason, right? And I don't think, for the most part, and I'm a gullible person that mostly believes that people are trying to do the right thing, I guess, but I don't think anyone's specifically trying to be disingenuous or give misinformation. But I do think that, some of these things that get heard through the grapevine don't always make a ton of sense. Like the Rodgers boycotting the Super Bowl, to me, that never passed the sniff test. And I know there were a couple different people that reported it. It wasn't just Boomer Esiason. I just don't ever imagine that Aaron Rodgers was going to, in any significant way, boycott the Super Bowl. Ultimately, he sort of did anyway. But that's another story for another day. But we're going to get these like bizarre and weird rumors, right? So the two today, and one is not exactly a rumor. It was from Ben Albright, and his tweet was, if Aaron Rodgers does leave Green Bay, wouldn't be surprised to see them pursue Marcus Mariota. Now, this was not a report. This was not a something that he wrote up in big detail and said, like, watch for Marcus Mariota to go to the Packers. This is him basically thinking out loud. And I have a ton of respect for Ben Albright. I know some people are like, meh, whatever, but I think Ben's great. I think he does a phenomenal job, and he's usually very close to the ground with Denver. So, whatever. But this much more seemed like he's just sort of, saying out loud, if Rodgers left Green Bay, wouldn't be shocked to see Mariota in Green Bay. And my thought on that is, I don't think that take is that out there. I think if Rodgers were to leave, I think Green Bay would absolutely bring in a veteran to compete with Jordan Love. I absolutely don't think that they would have the money to spend on a priority free agent that would be able to come in and be a stud right away. I think it would have to be some sort of value signing that, again, would compete with Jordan Love. I think a player of the ilk of Marcus Mariota makes some sense. Matt LaFleur coached him, of course, with the Titans, and Mariota was a starting quarterback for him. So there's pieces that you can put together there. I don't think that statement is that like all insane or wild. As long as you take it under the guise of like, this is just Ben Albright thinking out loud. This isn't a report of him saying, watch for Marcus Mariota to Green Bay. I'm hearing, via sources that Mariota to Green Bay is going to happen or anything like that. He's just, again, saying that if Rodgers were to leave, I could see Marcus Mariota potentially being a fit in Green Bay. I don't disagree with that notion. That's obviously not a great thing to think about as a Packer fan, going from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers to Marcus Mariota. I still think there's maybe some untapped potential with Mariota, but you're taking a pretty big, step down there in that regards to going to Mariota and Jordan Love competing. But I don't think that that's that crazy. But again, just take it as a grain of salt. It's not a reported item as like this is going to happen. And then on Pro Football Network, sources tell Tony Pauline that Aaron Rodgers has told people in confidence that wherever he ends up, he wants receivers Davante Adams and MVS by his side. Okay. Let's put it this way. That's not like that of a far-fetched thought, right? I'm sure if Aaron Rodgers went somewhere, he would love to play with Davante Adams and MVS. I don't think that that's crazy. I could easily see him having a conversation with Brian Gutekunst saying, listen, I really want to be in Green Bay, but, can you get Adams and MVS back? I could easily see if he wants to go somewhere else and Green Bay is not, going to pay, he finds out they're not going to pay Davante Adams what he wants. And he says, I think I'm going to go somewhere else. I could easily see him having a conversation with Davante and maybe even MVS and saying, hey, I'm probably going to go play for a team that has a lot of salary cap. And if I go play with them, they probably would be interested in signing you as well. So maybe we could do this together somewhere else. I don't think any of that's far-fetched. Now, I did a podcast with Tony Pauline for over 2 years. He is as genuine as it gets. I don't think any of his information is like phony or erroneous or anything like that. I do think that anytime you hear, Aaron Rodgers, quote, told people in confidence, I think Aaron Rodgers' circle is very tight. I don't think things get out very easy in that regard. So while I don't think that is like this crazy far-fetched idea, I think anytime you hear like, Aaron Rodgers told people in confidence, I tend to take those with a little bit of grain of salt just because of who Rodgers is and how close he keeps things. And sometimes I don't even put it by him to potentially leak some stuff just to see what gets out, or even just to leak things to mess with the media. Like I just wouldn't. So again, take both of those rumors for what they're worth. And the other thing that's like telling here, right, is like, all right, so Aaron Rodgers has told people in confidence that he wants Davante and MVS with him. Not Big Dog, not Randall Cobb, not two of his two favorite people in the world, who are both going to probably get released by Green Bay, and a million times will get released if Aaron Rodgers is gone. Like, he doesn't want to play with them. It's just MVS and Davante. So again, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of this stuff, but that's where I'm at with both of those, quote unquote rumors. All right, I want to get to my main topic before we get out of here today, and that's sort of this idea, like, where is this entire offseason going to head? And I'm going to be totally transparent with you. I'm going to be, as always, I'm going to be 1,000,000% upfront. In every other season, if you remember last year, I was showing you guys like spreadsheets of like, all right, here's who they could cut, here's who they could keep, here's who you could move around, here's who you could restructure. And there was like a finite amount of things. Now, I got plenty of things wrong in that example when I did that, but it was more of an effort to show you, if you cut this person and this person, here's how you can move money around and here's what space you could have. This offseason has so many different iterations. It's like Doctor Strange when they're, he's trying to calculate the best odds to beat Thanos. Like, there's so many different multiverses here of what could potentially happen. And one thing just spirals and dominoes in so many different directions that I could probably do about 30 podcasts straight of like, here's one option, here's the next option, here's another thing they could do. There's just so many things. And Green Bay has some decisions that they have to make, which I'm going to get to in a moment, that could ultimately decide what direction they go. How much from future cap do they want to borrow? Do they want to go in a potential rebuild mode, which it seems like they do not. So there's just so many variables here that the calculations and the calculus for this all gets very crazy very fast. So this is not meant to be like a steadfast, here are the only 4 options that they could do. But this is sort of how things will ultimately kick off, and some directions I think they could go in depending on how those different multiverses start to go. So we're going to run through those. The other thing I want to tell you is, because there's so many variables here and how much Green Bay wants to take from future caps, and if they want to go all in for another season, and which players they prioritize, and if Aaron Rodgers is back, and if Davante Adams is closer to actually wanting $30 million, which was reported on Wednesday, or if it's closer to 20 to 25, like, all of these things can fluctuate in so many different directions that some of the things I'm going to tell you, I can't tell you for certainty that Green Bay would be willing to or could do like exactly what I'm telling you. Again, if you go back and listen to last year's, I could tell you with a level of certainty they could do this, they couldn't do this. We are in Pandora's box of Packers football right now, and anything could happen this offseason. Nothing would surprise me, nothing would shock me, and I think we have to buckle up and get ready for the fact that this could go as vanilla as you could possibly imagine, and basically they run things back minus maybe 2 or 3 players, or they could go in an entirely different direction, or we could go somewhere in the middle, or literally everything in between, outside, etc. So I'll go through these, but just remember that nothing is really finite. Everything is on the table, as Aaron Rodgers said the other day, and it's just time to sort of come to the realization that there could be some of your favorite players that aren't back. They could run it all back again. So let's go through these. So I think the first thing, and this is not breaking news here, the first thing is figuring out Aaron Rodgers, but it's figuring out Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams. These two, in some capacity, seem linked. Now, maybe that doesn't ultimately end up being the case. Maybe Rodgers is back and Adams is gone. Maybe Adams is back and Rodgers is gone. Maybe Rodgers and Adams both stay in Green Bay. Maybe Rodgers goes to one team, Adams goes to another, or maybe they do both end up on another team and it ends up being the same team. Time will tell. But in some capacity, and as Aaron Rodgers mentioned on the Pat McAfee show, it seems like he wants to find out what Green Bay has plans for with Davante Adams. And it seems like he wants to make a decision before free agency so that Adams can make an educated decision on his end as well. And that the Packers can do everything, right? It just makes it easier for the Packers and Adams and all of Green Bay's free agents if Rodgers makes that determination before free agency, so everyone on the team can do what they need to do. And I expect him to stick with that and make that decision prior to the start of free agency. So the order of events begins with Adams and Rodgers. And I think the first thing that Green Bay has to do is figure out if they are in fact connected. If Green Bay is saying we can't get Adams back at the number that he wants, does Rodgers say, I want out? That's within the realm of possibility. Is Rodgers open to staying if they can't come to an agreement with Adams? And vice versa. If all of a sudden Rodgers retires or Rodgers says, I'm out, can they still keep Davante Adams? And that's where the entire domino begins. Because if Adams and Rodgers are both here, salary cap comes insanely, and I mean insanely tight for everything else. And almost like the vast majority of your other free agents and decisions are going to have to be made with the tightest of pennies pinched, because there's just not going to be that much money. You're going to give so much money to Rodgers and Adams, even if you backload stuff, like you're going to give them so much money, it's going to be very difficult from there. Now there's ways, I'm not saying it's impossible, but that's the first thing. And the same token on the flip side is if Adams and Rodgers are both gone, how aggressive do you want to be with bringing people back? If Adams says I'm out and Rodgers says I'm out, it probably behooves you to trade It definitely behooves you to trade Aaron Rodgers at that point, and hopefully that hope that he doesn't retire and get back as many assets as possible. While you could also toy with the idea of trying to tag Davante Adams and trading him. Now, technically that's frowned upon, but it has been done in the past, and it's tough for the league to sort of usher in penalties based off of that. So that's something that they could look to do as well. So that is by far and away the first two dominoes that have to fall. And that's what Green Bay needs to figure out first, is how connected are they? And then if they figure out that Rodgers is able to come back and they, even without Adams, then they have to make that decision as well. Do they want to try to do everything in their power with Adams, or do they want to use those resources to try to keep the rest of the team together, understanding that when Adams hasn't been in the lineup, they've still been successful. And we've seen that Aaron Rodgers gets a little Davante Adams happy at times. And when he's not, he seems to spread the ball out better, get the ball out of his hands, and maybe run a little bit better version of Matt LaFleur's offense. So all of those are decisions, and that has to be the first thing. And again, once that's decided, if they're gone, how big of a rebuild do you want to do? Do you want to go all out and almost tank fest and rebalance your books and get a ton of picks in from a Rodgers trade, maybe trade Davante in a sign and trade or a tag and trade, and then, have a bunch of picks next year because you didn't do well this year? That's an option. That's a possibility. Do I think they'll go in that direction? No, but those are all things that they're going to have to figure out. So if Rodgers, I'll just kind of run this down in order. What happens if Rodgers doesn't come back? Are they going to try to tag and trade Davante? Is Jordan Love your starter? Do you want to bring in competition? And how far do you want to go with a rebuild? Those are all questions that you have to ask. So if Rodgers doesn't come back, then all of those things become very much within the realm of possibility. Here's what I would do in that situation if I were Green Bay. I would very much look to maintain and build the defense that you have right now, because we saw the ability for that defense to be a shutdown defense. I don't think Z's going to be back in any capacity no matter what. I think that's done with. But I think you could bring back probably everything else if Aaron Rodgers is gone. I think you could bring back Lowry, Preston Smith, Whitney Merciless, Devondre Campbell, Rasul Douglas. I think you could maybe Shannon Sullivan, and of course Kevin King, and some of those may not be back. I think you could get back Tyler Lancaster if you want him. I think you could basically bring back what we saw in the finale against the 49ers where they played so well, minus Zadarius Smith. And I think that alone could give you the ability to win the division. And I think that still has value. And then in the meantime, if you can trade Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams for, let's just say it's the Denver deal, right? And you get a ton of draft picks and maybe a Jerry Jeudy in, and you can build up your offense on the youth side of things, spend premium picks on weapons for Jordan Love to build up that offense, and probably bring in a veteran quarterback, whether that be a Marcus Mariota or somebody else, to compete for that job. I think the thinking there is now you're going to surround this offense with young talent that you're hoping are going to all develop at the same time. In the meantime, you've got a potentially devastating great defense that can still win you games and potentially win you the division and keep you competitive. And if all of a sudden it clicks with Jordan Love, or maybe you sign a Marcus Mariota and he pulls a weird, Ryan Tannehill and all of a sudden becomes good in a new system, you maybe still have the ability to compete. So that would probably be the direction that I would go in if Rodgers decides that he's not back, is let Matt LaFleur kind of build this offense in his image with young players, young talent, and let Matt LaFleur do the heavy lifting and then build up maintain that defense, right? It's working. We saw it against San Francisco, and keep doing that. So that's where I would probably start in that scenario. If Rodgers does come back, again, you have to figure out, is this contingent upon Davante Adams? And then I think you have to have the conversation of, how do you make that work? And I think that conversation has to be had with Aaron Rodgers too, to say, listen, if we bring you and Davante Adams back, there's no money for all of these other things. Like Devondre's probably gone. We might have to release Preston Smith. Adrian Amos is in question. Billy Turner's gone. And some of those things might happen no matter what. But, I think you have to have the discussion of there's no money left at that point. So I think you have to have that discussion at that point. And then just how good can you be? Because I think you're probably going to have to make some really difficult decisions on defense. I think you're going to have to make some really difficult decisions on offense. And now it's going to be up for Rodgers and Adams to do the heavy lifting. And I could make an argument that might be the worst case scenario. And I know that sounds harsh right now, but I think you could say that if you can bring back Rodgers and Adams, but it costs you Devondre Campbell, Rasul Douglas, you have to release Za'Darius and Preston, and maybe try to get Adrian Amos back. Dean Lowry's gone, Mercedes Lewis is gone. Maybe you can get a Randall Cobb and a Lewis back on a cheap team friendly deal. That's within the realm of possibility. Billy Turner's gone. And all of a sudden you really kind of hack out the rest of your team just to bring Adams and Rodgers back. I think you can make a strong argument that you're just not going to have a well-rounded enough team to make a run at it, and you're just sort of delaying the inevitable. So I think that's the next thing that they're going to have to decide, is if that's the situation, if Rodgers and Adams are joined at the hip, and that's the only way Rodgers is coming back, can you make that work, and is it the best possible decision, to make? And then I think the last one here is, what happens if Aaron Rodgers comes back without Davante Adams? And my scenario here is very similar to my scenario without Aaron Rodgers, the Jordan Love scenario, right? Where you build up the defense and then let Matt LaFleur do the heavy lifting. I do the same in the Aaron Rodgers situation. If Aaron Rodgers is back and Davante Adams isn't, I'm going to do everything that I can to keep that defense in place. Again, probably besides Za'Darius Smith, you might have to move on from Dean Lowry in that situation, but I think that you could probably keep everything back together. And now you've got Aaron Rodgers, and you've potentially got a stud offensive line still if everyone gets back healthy, with Bakhtiari, John Runyon Jr., Josh Myers, probably Elton Jenkins at right tackle, probably Royce Newman at right guard. You still have a very good offensive line. You can probably get Tunyon back on a cheap prove-it deal, Lazard back on a restricted deal, and now you spend your draft picks and maybe a veteran free agent, a cheaper veteran free agent signing on building back up that wide receiver core to try to give Aaron Rodgers some weapons. And that in that situation, again, I'm saying I want to make the defense great. And on offense, we're going to let Rodgers and LaFleur do the heavy lifting. We're not going to have a Davante Adams. It's going to be a little bit more difficult, but we think if we run this offense the way that it's supposed to be run, we can have as much, if not more success, maybe without a Davante Adams, because it's not so honed in on one special player. And I'll say here too that this is not me wanting to see, Davante Adams may very well be my favorite Green Bay Packer of all time. Just full stop. Him and Tremont Williams are in quite the fight right now. Charles Woodson's on that list. There's others as well, but it very well may be Davante Adams. So I have no interest in seeing Davante Adams not be a Green Bay Packer. Like I said, full stop. But as you think about these things, and I try to bring you an idea of what a GM is thinking through as much as possible, those are the things that you have to make. As a fan, screw it, right? I want Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams and as many people back as I can possibly want. No question about it. But from a roster building mechanism, you have to ask, is it really the best thing for the Green Bay Packers to try to bring both of those guys back? So how that order of operations goes, again, if Rodgers is back and maybe you move on from Adams in that situation, you're probably looking at releasing Cobb, Crosby, Zadarius Smith, Billy Turner, Mercedes Lewis, maybe doing some restructure, for sure doing a lot of restructuring, but probably with Aaron Jones, Aaron Rodgers, David Bakhtiari, Kenny Clark, Jair Alexander to an extension, Adrian Amos, Dean Lowry, Preston Smith. You may need to release a couple more of those guys, but at minimum, trying to get as many restructures on the books as possible. I think you would try to bring back Rasul Douglas, Devondre Campbell, Whitney Merciless, maybe a Tyler Lancaster. Probably bring Tunyon back on a prove-it deal, Lazard back on his restricted free agent tender, Yash back on his restricted free agent tender. Try to keep the defense as status quo as possible, minus Zadarius Smith. Wide receiver becomes a major priority for the rest of the offseason. Go out and draft some weapons. Find a couple, free agents, let Goot go to work, just like he did last year with Devondre Campbell and, Rasul Douglas, is finding some hidden gems. Let Rodgers and LaFleur do the heavy lifting on offense and play a defensive brand of football with taking care of the football on offense and letting Rodgers do some heavy lifting when you get into those situations and maybe not targeting one specific receiver quite as much. That's what I would do. Like I said, we are in the free agency multiverse now, and everything that could and will happen could and can happen, right? So we will see, and I can speak to you with 1,000,000% less confidence than I have in just about any other offseason at this point as to what could concretely happen. Because again, until those early dominoes fall and until Green Bay decides, how to restructure free agents and free up the space that they need, once we get to that point, I can look you in the eye and tell you with much more confidence, here are things that they can do the remainder of this, whether it be free agency, draft, etc. So we'll get there, I promise. But this is sort of your zoom out 10,000 foot view of what this offseason might look like and maybe some different directions that they can go in. Again, with the idea that could be no Adams, no Rodgers, Adams and Rodgers, Adams without Rodgers, and probably the least likely of all, Rodgers without Adams, but probably the least likely of all would be Adams with no Rodgers. But like I said, nothing would surprise me. Nothing would shock me. I appreciate you so much for joining me. We will be here all off season. I will be right back here tomorrow with Mike Wall, which you will not want to miss. He's going to have some amazing takes on that Packers 49ers game. So make sure to check that out and subscribe if you haven't already. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.